This meeting is being held in conformance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice has been given to the newspaper, and notice of the meeting has been posted in public places. Next open public meeting of the council will be held on Monday, October 10th, 2016, at 7:30 p.m. Mrs. Dungy. Dr. Greenberg.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Mr. Green's on the phone, just for everybody's edification, he's on vacation, and Mrs. Panos should be calling, and we have a bridge line.
Mr. Mollis.
Yes, here.
Mrs. Panos.
Is Mrs. Panos on? Not yet. Okay.
Mr. Rosencrantz.
Here.
Mrs. Sohar. Here. Mrs. Walker.
Here.
President Cahill.
Here.
8 present.
Okay, special meeting, do you want to say anything, Mr. Attorney, before we get into this?
Sure, thank you, Mr. President. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, what we're here this evening is a special meeting for purposes of introduction of 5 ordinances. This is not the public hearing. Again, so it's a special meeting. There'll be a public comment because there's a public meeting here, but council won't be having a public hearing on the ordinances if in fact they get introduced. To the extent that they do get introduced, the public hearing is scheduled for Friday, October 14th at 7 p.m., and that's when you'd have an opportunity to have a public hearing on the ordinance if they get introduced. Certainly have an opportunity for comment, but again, it's not for purposes of council having discussions with respect to adoption or not. But before we get started, we need to have an executive session. So we have a resolution for purposes of going to executive session for attorney-client privilege matters pertaining to affordable housing litigation, and that be it further resolved that after executive session, we'll reconvene in public session for purposes of continuing the agenda. So at this point, Mr. President, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the resolution to go into executive session.
Can I have a motion to move executive session, please?
Make a motion.
Mr. Rosencrantz move, can I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mollis, roll call, please, to go into executive session.
Mrs. Dungy? Dr. Greenberg? Yes. Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
Mrs. Sohar? No. Mrs. Walker? Yes. President Cahill?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no.
Okay, motion to go into executive session is passed. We're going to go into executive session, and as the attorney said, once we're finished, we'll reconvene and bring the public back in. Okay? So everybody has to vacate the premises now. Thank you. Councilman Green, and we believe Councilwoman Panos. Are you there, Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Okay. We have Councilman Green and Councilwoman Panos on the phone. They were on vacation, but they dialed in. What we're going to do is, this is first reading ordinances. As Mr. Roselli said, we're going to introduce the ordinances. We'll vote up or down, ordinances 1 through 5, and then we'll have a public portion to discuss. Okay, just so the public knows what's going on.
Just so it's clear, again, it's not a public hearing. Council's not obligated to make any responses. It's an opportunity because it's a public meeting. To the extent if they are introduced, the public hearing on these ordinances presently scheduled for Friday, October 14th at 7 p.m. And that's when we'd have a full hearing on the ordinances.
Okay, everybody understand that? So that, again, there will be a public portion after we vote up or down on these. Okay, ordinances first reading, number 1, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance by amending various sections of same pursuant to the 1999 to 2025 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan adopted by the Township Planning Board and establishing the MUIH Mixed Use Inclusionary Housing Zone. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion.
Moved by Mr. Rosencrantz. Can I have a second?
Second, sir.
Second by Mr. Mollis. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dungy?
No.
Dr. Greenberg?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis?
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
Mrs. Sohar? Mrs. Walker?
No.
President Cahill?
Yes.
5 yes, 4 no.
Number 2, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance by amending various sections of same pursuant to the 1999 to 2025 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan adopted by the Township Planning Board and establishing the IH1 inclusionary housing zone. Can I have a motion, please?
Move
Housing
it.
Zone 1, excuse me. Moved by Mrs. Panos. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mr. Green. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dungy? Dr. Greenberg?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis,
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrans?
Yes.
Mrs. Sohar?
No.
Mrs. Walker?
No.
President Cahill?
Yes.
5 yes, 4 no.
Number 3, an ordinance of the
I don't
town...
know, Councilmember Dungy has her microphone on.
Oh, yeah, Ms. Dungy, if you could put your
Can't
microphone
hear her
on.
vote.
Yep, thank you. Number 3, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance by amending various sections of same pursuant to the 1999 to 2025 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan adopted by the Township Planning Board and establishing the H Hospital Zone. Can I have a motion, please?
Move it.
Moved by Mr. Rosencrans. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Mollis. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Dungy?
No.
Dr. Greenberg?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis,
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrans?
Yes.
Mrs. Sohar? No. Mrs. Walker?
No.
President Cahill?
Yes.
5 yes, 4 no.
Number 4, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance by amending various sections of same pursuant to the 1999 to 2025 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan adopted by the Township Planning Board and established in the IH2 Inclusionary Housing Zone 2. Can I have a motion, please?
Move it.
Moved by Mr. Rosencrans. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mollis. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dungy?
No.
Dr. Greenberg?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis,
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrans?
Yes.
Mrs. Sohar? Mrs. Walker?
No.
President Cahill?
Yes.
5 yes, 4 no.
Number 5, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance by rescinding and replacing Section 250-65 of the Township Land Development Ordinance. Can I get a motion, please?
Move it.
Moved by Mrs. Panos. Can I get a second? Second by Mr. Green. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Dungy?
No.
Dr. Greenberg?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis,
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrans?
Yes.
Mrs. Sohar?
No.
Mrs. Walker?
No.
President Cahill?
Yes.
5 yes, 4 no.
Okay. So for the public's, again, for the public's edification, I know it's complicated, I'm just trying to explain everything that's going on. So ordinances 1 through 5 were introduced tonight, okay? Meaning that we will have the special hearing that the attorney talked about on October 14th, Friday at 7 PM here. That will be a public hearing whereby we will actually have a regular hearing where people can speak about the ordinances. But we are going to open it up to the public now, so I will open it up to the public. Who would like to be heard? Anybody like to be heard from the public on these ordinances? Or in general? Okay? I'll close the public portion. Oh, okay. Is it about this?
Yes.
Yeah, please, come up to the mic after.
I don't think I need to.
Well, actually, you do though, because you're on TV and, yeah, sorry, just so the people,
I project.
I'm sure you're going to say something profound and people want to hear you at home, so.
Are
Yep.
there 5 ordinances? Because these are
Can
going to
you
be
just do, I need your name and address, just for the record.
separate places.
Yep.
Is each ordinance for a location?
Name and address, please.
My name?
Yeah, just your name and
Pamela
address for the record.
Ailman.
Great, thank you.
So are there 5 ordinances because there are 5 locations in town that you're going to build on or would like to build on?
Well, again, we're not building, but go ahead.
Right, there's actually, there are 5 ordinances, 4 of them pertain to zoning areas that there's potential for development. The 5th one has to do with the last one. The last one has to do with you have to have an affordable housing ordinance in place, which states how the town will take care of its affordable housing, how it would do its rehab component and shares like that. But the other 4 pertain to the potential for, which we refer to as inclusionary housing developments.
And are these all affordable housing?
There's a component of each of the proposed developments that will be affordable housing, but the entire development will not be affordable housing.
But they'll all be apartments. They'll be rented.
No,
They'll be owned.
some of them,
a mixed use,
the overall plan, I don't know where you were, but there's an overall plan that the town has developed. There's a component in which, for instance, it's municipally sponsored, where units will be owned. There's a component where there are some rentals. There's a portion of it where there's assisted living beds, where they're considered to be affordable. There are some, and then there's some townhouses as well that would be rentals and ownership. So it's a mixture. But the largest component would be apartments, but they're not all apartments.
But the major, what are we talking? 80% of the project is apartments?
So what we'll do is, what we're gonna try to do, and I talked to the mayor, I mentioned this, try to get the breakdown as to which are apartments, which are ownership, and which are townhomes, that type of breakup.
And that'll be at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public want to be heard? Yes, ma'am. Just name and address for the record, please.
Pat Churchill, Lawrence Harbor.
Right.
Doesn't specify where these locations are. Is that something that's available?
Yeah.
The ordinances, if you look at the ordinances themselves, which you can get copies of, specifies where they're located. Copies of the ordinances, which you can get in the clerk's office. Or if they're online, you can get copies from the clerk's office.
Thank you.
Can we just maybe name these off, like we did the last time?
Yeah, but it doesn't include everything.
Right,
You can do
that's
that.
true, yeah. Anybody else from the
Can
public
I-
want to be
can
heard?
Can I say something? For the 14th, can we have handouts for the people so that they know
Well,
where,
we're gonna-
that would be a good idea.
We'll have the
Thank
same
you.
presentation, we'll have the presentation like we did last time.
Sir?
Where we identified all the locations and where they were.
It's a good idea, just so people have a document, you know? Yeah.
George Millett from Shoreland Circle in Lawrence Harbor. How are you all? I had a question since I searched online on the Old Bridge website for information about this ordinance. It says, amending Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled and so on and so forth. I found it rather interesting to note that the new version is online and the old version is gone. Since you're just passing this, was that a mistake?
Oh, actually, the old version is online, because that's,
Well, it's not what comes up when you do a search on the
if
code.
you go to the code book, it's in the code book.
Excuse me?
If you go to the code book, it's in the code book.
Yes, that's what I was searching online. Now, I haven't gone to the code book in the township, but can we know where that is and have copies made available of the old Chapter 250, which is, what is it, about 40 pages?
Section 65 is in the code book.
Right. Can we
I
have,
don't know how, if you go online, if I go online into the code book, it's there.
yes, can we have paper copies made so that we compare what
Sure.
changes are made? And where will they be available?
You can, I don't know where to make them available, you get from clerk's office, I don't know, wherever you want them available, you can make them available. When you want them, I don't know.
Mark's microphone. Nobody can hear him.
No, it is available. All the information is available. The ones that are introduced or made available, the old one is in the township code book. And so what's happening is, it's just being replaced There aren't, actually, a lot of it's state mandated in any event, so, I can't tell you how you get it, but if you go to the code book, it's there, and the one that's being introduced is available as well, where you can get it online or in the clerk's office.
Well, since you mentioned it, may I ask, what's wrong with waiting until after November 28th, when the Supreme Court hears the case from the appellate division? The appellate division case being the one on which you're basing a lot of these assumptions?
Well, we have a different deadline, and Mr. Kunzman can talk to you, the Supreme Court, but here in Middlesex County, we've been involved in the process with respect to approval of our plan. We have a return date of October 17th in front of Judge Wolfson, who handles all the cases in Middlesex County. That was a return date. The court preliminarily determined that the town's plan was acceptable. We, as part of the process, the planning board had to adopt the amended housing, master plan and housing element. We had to go back for a final hearing on October 17th. If, in fact, we don't adopt it on October 17th, the court has already advised us that we'd be subject to builders' remedy suits. That's
And
the time-
since the
time frame.
judge is a Superior Court judge, I'm sure he's aware that an unpublished decision, such as that appellate decision, is neither compelling nor controlling to other Superior Court decisions, and especially to other appellate divisions and to the Supreme Court. So, once again, why can't we wait until after November 28th? They
Mr.
may-
Kunzman, if you
see.
could,
What?
maybe Mr. Kunzman could.
Different issue, too.
The Supreme Court decision is really only on a particular component, which is called the gap period.
Right,
It's only addressing the gap period, and that has been taken into consideration.
but you know they're going
terms
to
of-
uphold that part of the decision.
If the court reverses the appellate division, then we're subject to a much larger share.
Then-
If it affirms it, we'll probably be where we are.
Where we stand as residents of Old Bridge if you pass an ordinance and the Supreme Court overturns portions of,
They're not going to be, the Supreme Court has a very narrow issue right before it, which is, do you
Can you just hold the
calculate?
mic up a little bit if you could?
The question is, do you calculate the need from 1999 to 2025 or from 2015 to 2025? It isn't a question of whether it goes away. It's only a question of how big.
well, I understand that, and I've had two Supreme Court decisions decided in the state of New Jersey on briefs I wrote, and the second was by far the most interesting, because they decided it not on an issue I presented in the brief, but they decided it in our favor. So I think it's premature to go ahead before November 28th.
But November 28th is only oral argument.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public would like to be heard? Yes, please. Is that your baby, by the way? Yeah. Congratulations. Welcome.
Samantha Manberg from Baby Drive in Lawrence Harbor. I won't be available next Friday night, so I just wanted to state, just general.
14th,
Yeah, we won't be
That is
available.
Friday. Yeah. no,
following Friday.
Friday,
She
yeah.
said-
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking Friday, this Friday.
okay. I just wanted to state a general objection to the, as I understand it, large amount of housing units that would be built according to these ordinances. And over time, having changed the proportion of land use from commercial and residential to more and more residential and more units, objecting to that on the basis of raising our taxes due to higher educational costs from so many residential units and not enough tax revenue. So I'm putting that out there.
Thank
Is
you.
there, do you have any response to that? Has there been any study done on how much our taxes will go up? Anything you can talk about?
No. We'll wait till the 14th.
Yeah, we're going to have the hearing on the 14th where we'll get into the nuts and bolts, but
And is there a reason to make a meeting on a Friday night?
it has to
Yeah,
be 10.
Well, you're
yeah,
right.
sorry.
Again, believe me, the last thing to my wife's birthday, the last thing I wanted to be here is for my wife's birthday. Again, we have the deadline for October 17th. The court wants us to decide one way or another, so that drove it. And then, under state statute, there has to be a minimum amount of days between introduction and adoption. It happens to be 10 days. And with 2 council members away, getting the notices out, this wasn't the easiest thing to coordinate. And again, I want to thank Ms. Ward and Ms. Green and their assistance in getting this coordinated. So that's why, because it just fell on the 4th, and the 10 days in between is the 14th.
We don't want to be here Friday night either, trust me, so,
All right.
thank you. Anybody else? Yes? I'll get to you in a second. Yeah.
Hello, Donna Wilson, Shoreland Circle. I would like to make a suggestion. We had a presentation at the last council meeting that didn't get canceled, and that was very useful. Could that possibly be put on the township website?
Mary, is that possible?
It's, a PDF file or something, and then there might be less confusion about where things are, who's doing what where. And in general, personally, I'm speaking only to the Lawrence Harbor ordinance because, yeah, it's in my backyard and I really haven't had a chance to examine the other sites. This is the same site that the township felt was inappropriate to overbuild a few years ago, before I moved here. So this happened before I got here, and it was for 82. What makes this site now appropriate for so much additional units, so many additional units? What changed between, aside from having is dictate the right word? Court order, yeah, a dictate.
I don't know, I've addressed it time and again at the last meeting. I could do it again, but again, part of it was part of the process where we had interveners, the property owner.
What is an intervener?
Someone who formally involved themselves in the process by which the town had to have a court confirm its proposed housing plan.
This would be the builders who wanted to develop that land?
Yes, the property
Okay, so
owners.
the builders said, we want to build here.
No,
And
the builders, again, and I went through this, but there was a process that we had to follow that was set by the Supreme Court, where we had to file a verified complaint indicating that we would meet the requirements of the Supreme Court decision that was rendered last March of 2015. Part of that process, we had to file a declaratory judgment complaint that said, court, we will comply and we will propose a fair share plan that would give us a reasonable opportunity to provide affordable housing. Any party at that point who had an interest could intervene, become a party, immerse themselves to participate. And there were 4 parties who did that. One of them included the property owner for what we refer to as the Alfieri property, I think what you're referring to. So
Yes.
they filed a motion to intervene so that they could
So
participate
they
in the
came
process.
forward and said, we can help solve your problem, let us do what you wouldn't let us do a few years ago?
No, they basically said, we
I'm
ha-
getting different
Right,
answers.
sure. Basically what they said was, we have land, we would like to develop it as part of your fair housing plan. And so, again, because they have standing, the ability to represent their position before the court or object to our plan, you have to, it's not like you can just
You
sit
have
there
to
and say
hear
no.
them.
You have to address them, right? That you
Address them,
can't put your
yes.
head in the sand and say, I don't recognize you, right?
You could, but you rightly chose not to do
Because
that.
otherwise, right, otherwise they'll continue to object, and the court's going to say, what about Mr. Alfieri? He has this proposal, and he's telling us that he can provide a realistic opportunity to provide affordable housing. You need to address him. So again, with all the
Addressed
interveners,
him by agreeing to it.
well, again, there's address him by seeing if he can come up with a proposal that can assist the township to meet its affordable housing
And
obligation.
There were no other than these builders that came forward on other tracts of land. And
There was one other.
Okay.
And he filed a motion to intervene, but it was late, so the court did not allow him to intervene. And then, again, the town also stepped forward and proposed, as I said before, government-sponsored projects, in which I think that accounts for 85 of the overall obligation.
those
so
are
that
the
reduced it.
disabled veterans?
There was the veterans
Yeah.
component, right, and then there's a component of that in Lawrence Harbor, that are the townhouses, there will be ownership. So that was another component of it as well.
And we had to have, to satisfy this court order, we had to have builders in place?
You have to.
Just have a vague, we're going to.
You cannot, correct. You cannot just say, hey, and I said that before, you can't just say
We
that.
picked a farm over here, we're going to put
Correct.
2,000 apartments
Right,
over
because-
there.
Right, exactly.
Whoop-de-doo.
Because the court would say, okay, Mr. Roselli and Mr. Kunzman, you say that, who, when, how, why, and is there real, and again, what the court looks at, is there a realistic opportunity for that to happen?
Okay,
So to the
now,
extent we
at
were
our-
to pick, some land somewhere in some place that says that we would like to have this development, two things would happen. The court would say, you're not really giving us a realistic opportunity because you can't tell us how that's going to happen, who's going to do it. And then the other thing is you're going to have these other parties who have this land, who want to develop, objecting and telling the court, that's not a realistic opportunity. We can present a realistic opportunity, and the court balances that, and ultimately, he'll make the decision.
And
Even from.
so
Mr.
when we're
Chair.
talking about, last time, I believe Mayor Henry mentioned that we had several fair housing proposals in the township that hadn't been built yet, and they'd been sitting there for years. Is that correct?
They are currently being constructed now. They were
Right.
approved back in the late 80s, 90s. The Woodhaven project, in particular, are building affordable units now as we speak.
And
Part of their inclusionary development in Woodhaven, they had a co-obligation. That was part of, I guess, round two, was our
Round two,
round
right.
two
Round two,
obligation. They are being built now after so many years. yes.
And Mr. Brunetti has a development in Oaks One that has
Oaks
a.
One, that when he does develop that, whether it be 3, 4, 5, 7, he'll have units to build in that as part of his obligation, made years ago,
From prior rounds.
prior rounds. So that's how long it takes for these units to get built.
And we anticipate, do we have any anticipation on when, for example, the Alfieri property would begin to be built? Because they've kind of been.
No, I mean,
chopping up the-
And again, these are not approvals. This is just a concept plan. They have to go through the whole approval process before the
But if it
boards.
stops here, it's stopped? No, it's
No,
not, okay.
no, not
It-
at all.
It doesn't go to the
Correct.
courts then?
It does not stop.
Well, right.
Sorry, it is stopped as far as the township
We can just
Correct,
finish up.
right. If it stopped here, right, if it stopped
at a
here,
time?
Pat, you can turn it off.
yeah, if it
We're
stopped.
just going to finish up.
If it stopped here, from the township's perspective, that would stop, but it wouldn't stop any developer
It
from
wouldn't
coming.
stop in the courts.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
But if this were not to take place, if this were voted down here, it would
Yes.
not go to the next phase within the township.
No, the next phase would be the court telling the builders, go ahead and file your builder's remedy suit, and we're going to tell you, Old Bridge, how many units they want to build.
Where,
and
how
where.
many, and that number
What
will be
type
much
and-
larger than the number that we've agreed to build over the next 10 years. There's no doubt about it. The builders now have the upper hand. We lose all control of where, conditions that we've placed in this settlement with the off-site improvements, of the number of units, we lose all control. We're not even in the room when that's happening. And the builders will tell the judge how they're going to solve Old Bridge's problem with affordable housing up to 10,000 units, which the fair share is saying we need to build.
That was the worst case. that was
10,000 was the overall market number that
That
drives.
that wasn't just the.
Affordable, right.
Affordable, because.
There's a-
that
it's a
would-
component,
that would mean we'd
exactly.
have-
But the low numbers are affordable, so the lower the number of affordable units, the lower number of market rate units. The higher number of affordable units, the higher number of market rate units. That's the razor, like your blood pressure.
Yeah, we've
So-
established I can.
Fair Share Housing is saying, Old Bridge, you need to build 3,600 affordable units, times that by market, and then you'll have your market rate units. We've agreed to 690 affordable units. That's why the number somewhere around 3,000
Yep.
total units come up. That's how that
Those
number.
were all the questions I had for this
Yeah,
evening.
well, and I think we'll have more information,
I-
to get to your point, at the meeting, and I think on the
And I
website as
am
well.
objecting to the Alfieri portion of
Understood.
it, and that it just seems inappropriate for the lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're patiently waiting. And then I saw another hand in the back, too, somewhere, I think. Okay, we'll let her go first, and then,
Good evening, Kathleen Millett, Shoreland Circle, Lawrence Harbor. May I respectfully request that the paperwork be accurate? The names on here have Reggie Butler's name instead of Miss Dungy. Could that be corrected for future meetings?
yeah, it's a different, go ahead, it's a different
All right.
template, go ahead.
When we do this on the site that we use for the agendas, there's different agendas. This is a special meeting. Not all the sections were corrected because we normally don't use special meetings. The company didn't have a chance to correct it in time. That's why it's like that.
The next special meeting, could we have Reggie rest in
We
peace?
definitely will, you know.
Also, Ms. Ann Miller was the last one who I could give a paper to. Could there be more agendas printed out, please, because there are no more available in the box? The last one was.
Think we can do that?
Sure.
May I make an observation? Mayor Owen Henry made a important selling point that,
You could do me a favor, just a little bit closer to the mic so people can hear you.
oh, Dawn is a little shorter than I am. We have the problem over the fence. I'm sorry, I was mentioning Reggie Butler's name is on this paper, and that Mrs. Miller had just received the last one, so I requested.
Yeah, you gotta talk to the mic because people can't hear
Face this way
you.
and talking to the
Yep.
mic.
Thank you. Mayor Henry, you made a very selling point to Mr. Mollis about the Alfieri project having so many units that we could have a train station that was hoped for and originally proposed at the Alfieri station, at the Alfieri project. I think since there were some changes with you saying yes and then no now, though I think we have to consider what happened at Track 5 in Hoboken, because I would ride this Spring Valley line from North Bergen County into Hoboken. I know that track. With that accident having taken place and the costs that will be going into other things, I don't think you can honestly say that we would be getting that Alfieri train station and put that into anybody's decision as to voting for or against that. There's one other thing. When our son was in middle school, he isn't very social, and when the middle school bus would not come for him, we lived so close on the shore there that he would walk home. I would get him into the car, pick up some of the kids who were there to fill up the van that we had and bring them to the middle school. At that time, I would see the school bus lined up on traffic because the parkway was backed up and nobody could come across that two-lane bridge wanting to go north on the Garden State Parkway. I would get the kids to school late, use the county road, come back, pick up more school kids. Those kids got detention because they couldn't be picked up. If that bridge, which was just repaired, now gets opened for 3 lanes, again, making Old Bridge a little farther away from Lawrence Harbor with the whole turnaround and how one gets there, that whole construction area may have our school kids needing extra buses, a bus at least, for the high school, because the middle school route may not be as timely. The kids, can't just be staying there by the basketball courts waiting for pickup and no bus come because of that Alfieri project having construction or delay. It's our school kids that really need to be taken to school on time. So if this goes through, please make sure that the kids in the harbor can get to school without detentions because the school bus can't make the high school trip and come back to pick them up for the middle school. Please, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public want to be heard on this? Yes? Yes, Mrs. Panos, we're still in public portion?
Yes, but,
Yeah, and Mrs. Panos, we're not going to do council comments tonight. We're going to,
my vote is in, correct?
yes.
And please keep my cell phone number 908-208-7978 to anybody who wants to call me.
Okay.
I'm on vacation.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Hang up now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for thank you for your participation. Yeah, I'm sorry. Name and address for the record, please. No. That was her signing off for the bridge, so sorry about that. Please. It was perfect timing, though, wasn't it? That was great.
Hi, my name is Karen Bonatiz. I live at 19 Lindsay Circle in Old Bridge. And I just would like to say, I don't live in Lawrence Harbor, and I am not thrilled about affordable housing in Old Bridge. However, I don't envy any of you for having to vote on this. I believe if we take it to the courts or if we do impact studies, it's just going to cost us a lot more money. And in the end, it's mandated by the state, and we're all between a rock and a hard place, and it's something that has to be done, unfortunately.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public want to be heard? Okay, I'll close the public portion on this. Remind the public there'll be a hearing on Friday the 14th, which is Friday the 14th at 7 o'clock in the council chambers. Motion to adjourn, please.
Move it.
By
Second.
Mr. Rosencrantz, second by Mr. Green. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dungey? Dungey?
What's your name?
Yes.
Dr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Green? Mr. Mollis? Yes. Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
Sohar?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker? Mrs. Walker?
Off dais.
President Cahill?
Yes. Motion is adjourned.
7 yes.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining, Rich. Appreciate it.